Welcome to this explainer on Zhuangzi's 2,400-year-old philosophy. Look, if you're feeling constantly overwhelmed, chronically exhausted, or just completely trapped in this endless cycle of overthinking, well, you're absolutely in the right place today. We're going to dive into what I think is a totally urgent, highly practical antidote to the anxiety of our crazy, fast-paced modern world. And honestly, what we're looking at today isn't some new life hack for working harder or managing your time better. It's actually a fundamental shift in how you interact with reality itself. So let's kick things off with a pretty provocative realization. What if most of your stress isn't actually caused by life itself, but by your desperate, relentless attempt to control it? I mean, think about it. Most of us are just exhausting ourselves trying to force life to go our way rather than, learning how to dance with it. We're going to unpack how an ancient thinker figured out that letting go of control is actually the ultimate power move. All right, section 1, the trap of control. We all fall into this trap, right? We meticulously plan our weeks, we color-code our schedules, and we just crave this absolute permanence in a universe that is constantly shifting. And what happens? The universe basically laughs at us. You get stuck in insane traffic, your crucial meeting gets abruptly canceled, or the market completely crashes. Suddenly, that perfectly designed plan of yours is entirely useless. And honestly, this brilliantly illustrates exactly why modern people are so exhausted. We are trying to process an infinite barrage of digital information, supercomputer tools that allow instant global communication, but we're doing it using emotional brains that were quite literally wired in the Stone Age. When your phone pings with an urgent email, your nervous system reacts as if a literal tiger just jumped out of the bushes. We're drowning in information but completely starving for peace, and it creates this massive, exhausting mismatch between our environment and our biology. Now, the really fascinating thing here is that Zhuangzi recognized the core of this mismatch 2,400 years ago. Long before smartphones or the internet were even a thought, he observed that trying to freeze a fluid reality is kind of like trying to nail water to a wall. I mean, the harder you swing the hammer, the more frustrated and wet you become. Life is just inherently fluid, but our minds so desperately want it frozen in place just so we can feel safe. Which leads us right into section 2, the illusion of identity. So, to stop trying to nail water to a wall, we really need to understand who is actually holding the hammer in the first place. There's this famous story where one night Zhuangzi had a dream that he was a freely flying butterfly. And he wasn't just pretending, he was completely immersed in the effortless joy of being this tiny creature. But when he woke up, he was struck by this profound kind of mind-bending question. Was I a man dreaming he was a butterfly, or am I now a butterfly dreaming I am a man? It sounds like a fun little riddle, but it's actually a radical questioning of our identity. It highlights that this self you think is so permanent and fixed is actually constantly transforming. Here's the really crucial point to take away. Life is a process. The person you were 10 years ago, completely gone. Even your current beliefs and desires have evolved over time. So when we desperately cling to these rigid identities, telling ourselves things like, I must always succeed, or I must always be respected, or I must never, ever fail, we essentially build our own psychological prisons. And every single prison guarantees its own specific kind of pain. And you know what's crazy? Modern neuroscience perfectly backs up this ancient wisdom. Think about when someone criticizes you online, and your ego traps you in those imaginary shower arguments for 3 days straight. Well, that lights up what scientists call the default mode network in your brain. This network is heavily associated with rumination, anxiety, and depression. You are literally multiplying your mental suffering by obsessing over me. Meanwhile, think about a tree or a river. A tree doesn't care if you call it ugly, it simply grows. A river has absolutely no ego, it simply flows. Nature doesn't have an identity crisis because it isn't constantly trying to protect some rigid image of itself. Okay, moving on to section 3, radical acceptance. Now, it's pretty easy to talk about flowing with reality when things are going relatively well, right? But how does this hold up against true grief?
Well, when Zhuangzi's wife died, everyone expected him to be totally devastated. But instead, a friend actually found him calmly sitting and singing. He explained to his friend that before her birth, she had no form. Then she gained form and she gained life. So her death was simply another natural transformation, like clouds becoming rain or day turning into night. He wasn't just coldly suppressing his emotions here, he was practicing radical acceptance. He deeply understood that arguing with reality is the absolute deepest cause of our suffering. Look, pain is totally inevitable in life, but the resistance to that pain, that is entirely optional. Let's explore how to actually do this in Section 4. Fasting of the Mind, or Shinjai.
To achieve that profound level of peace, we really have to clear our heads through a practice that Zhuangzi called Xinshai, which roughly translates to fasting of the heart-mind. Most of us have a deeply overcrowded mind. It's like a room stuffed full of opinions, past regrets, assumptions, and just this constant, never-ending internal commentary. Because of all that clutter, there's literally no space left for peace to enter. So fasting of the mind means clearing out that crowded room. It's about emptying your cup and listening deeply, so you finally have the empty space necessary to let reality simply reveal itself to you without immediately jumping to judge it. All right, let's make this actionable. Section 5, the Freedom Framework. Let's funnel all this ancient wisdom down into a highly tactical application. It's time to build a practical framework you can use the exact next time you feel your stress level start rising. Take a look at the underlying events in your life. They're just reality. Traffic exists, a relationship ends, a mistake is made. But it is your response, your anger, your stubborn resistance, your self-hatred that acts as a massive multiplier here. The result? Double suffering. The initial event creates basic pain, sure, but your complete refusal to accept it turns it into extended psychological suffering. You're fighting a war against reality, and honestly, reality always wins. So, to stop swimming upstream, you can immediately implement this 5-step framework. First, notice your resistance. Literally ask yourself what you are unwilling to accept right now. Second, release the labels. Stop saying this is terrible and just observe what is actually happening without any interpretation. Third, become curious. Ask what the situation is trying to teach you, instead of whining about why it's happening to you. Fourth, flow instead of force. Try to become adaptable and resilient like water, which is soft but can literally shape mountains over time. And finally, fifth, practice empty awareness. Just spend 10 minutes daily in quiet observation. No phone, no music, no stimulation. Just exist.
And that brings us to our final part, Section 6, the Paradox of Freedom.
As we wrap up this explainer, we arrive at the ultimate paradoxical realization at the very heart of Zhuangzi's teachings, and it completely flips our modern definition of success entirely on its head. The absolute deepest trap of all is believing that mastering life means forcing it to go your way. We all kind of think that if we can just control our environment, our income, and other people perfectly, we'll finally be free. But true, unshakable freedom actually begins the exact moment your inner peace stops being conditional on controlling the world around you. The greatest prison isn't external at all. It's our own psychological dependence on things going exactly as we planned.
So I'll leave you with this final thought and a question to carry with you today. What is the one situation in your life right now that you are finally ready to stop fighting so you can start flowing? Maybe the secret isn't mastering life, but just learning how to dance with it. Because, maybe the river knows where it's going a whole lot better than we do. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Have a real think on that question. And until next time, keep flowing.